Hi, I'm Jim Park. Welcome to this HDT Leadership Insights podcast. It's the second in a three-part series featuring Thermo King. You can catch the previous episode with Paul Crows on Heavy Duty Trucking's YouTube channel and in the audio podcast archive of your favorite podcast platform. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Thermo King's lead engineer for electrical systems, Matt Cernick. The topic du jour is a big one, the standardization and adoption of charging standards and the development of standards for power sharing. Both of these come with huge benefits for industry, but we've got a ways to go before we get there. Before we begin, remember to follow and connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcasts on the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of HDT's Leadership Insights podcast or HDT's Talks Trucking podcast. We'll be back with Matt Cernick right after this word from Thermo King.
This episode is sponsored by and produced in partnership with Thermo King. Thermo King's mission is to improve quality of life. That's why they constantly innovate to find increasingly cost-effective ways to ensure that passengers and temperature-sensitive goods make it to their destination safely and efficiently. Their commitment to sustainability extends to the environmental impacts of their people, products, operations, and services. Thermo King invented transportation refrigeration in 1938 and will help keep your fleet on the move.
Hey, Matt, how you doing today? Thanks for joining us on HDT Leadership Insights podcast.
Hey, Jim. Thanks. Great to be here. Great to be talking today about lots of important topics on transport refrigeration and the future of electrification.
Well, I can't wait to dig into this one. I enjoyed that conversation I had with Paul a few weeks back, so this one's going to be good too. When we're dealing with multiple vehicle configurations, multiple manufacturers, multiple suppliers in an environment like trucking, standards are almost always a good place to launch the discussion. Why is it so important to get this right from the start?
Well, standardization really helps the industry expand faster. If you have different vehicles or different systems with different plugs or different connectors or different ways of interfacing, all it does is confuse the market, create more interoperability problems, and ultimately delay implementation.
So it slows everything down and gets confusing. I know that firsthand, trying to plug a cell phone in to get it charged. You have multiple connectors, multiple plugs, and nobody ever has the one you need when you need it, right?
Right. Although, similar to charging your cellular equipment, it's really great to see the connectors improve and eventually go wireless. And maybe we'll see the same thing here for electric vehicles, but who knows?
We'll keep our fingers crossed. Let's start talking about the main standards that are already in place. We've got a couple. J1772, that's the AC electric charging vehicle standard or vehicle charging standard. SAE J3068 and the CCS standard. Some of these are dedicated commercial vehicles, some are for passenger cars. How does all this apply to the world of transportation refrigeration?
Well, it's all about how much power you can deliver, how much power you need, and what applications that power is for. Now, for commercial vehicles today, the most common way to charge them is CCS. So that's the DC charging, DC fast charging. Sometimes it's referred to. Although the charging rates on DC charging can vary anywhere from 25 kilowatts, which is fairly low and typical and similar to some of the AC charging levels, or way up to a megawatt of charging, which will come with some of the new Charin megawatt charging standards that are just being implemented today in some pilot locations. J1772, that's level 1 and level 2 charging that most EV drivers use in their homes. That's the most common form of charging and really is very applicable to consumer vehicles. It can be applicable to some passenger or commercial vehicles, but the charging rates may not be really acceptable to get those vehicles turned around quickly. J3068 is another emerging standard for commercial vehicles that SAE published a few years ago, but its adoption and implementation is still very early on.
Well, if we've got, I don't want to say competing standards, but 3 different standards, is that going to lead to some confusion in the near term? You mentioned the 3068. If that's in development now, is that going to push back the other standards or take its place when it comes to fruition?
It could, although as you see it defined, commercial vehicles don't necessarily operate in the same space as passenger cars or consumer vehicles. There is some crossover on, the class 1 through 5, maybe 1 through 6. But with the heavy duty vehicle charging standards, there could be some room for some new standards. Now, CCS today is defined as a combined charging standard, which includes, at least for North America, the CCS Type 1, which incorporates the J1772 connector from the AC charging and the DC connector for DC fast charging. And that's probably the most common application of a charging standard you'll see here in the near term for commercial vehicles.
Okay. Well, I know from the discussion I had previously with Paul Crows, transportation refrigeration requires both high and low power charging technologies. Why is that?
Transport refrigeration is definitely accessory operation on these electric vehicles. And today, when companies are planning for charging of those vehicles, they really look at the bulk charging, the fast charging, to get those miles back into those vehicles so they can go out, turn them around, and get them back on their delivery routes. For transport refrigeration, as we look at sharing the power source of those batteries with those vehicles, in a lot of cases, the transport refrigeration equipment is running after the vehicle has been fully charged. And most of the time, it's running off that battery of the electric vehicle. We see the application of lower power charging, whether that be AC charging or DC charging, to keep that vehicle fully topped up and run the transport refrigeration at the same time. We really believe that the customers and the fleets really want to see just one plug for their equipment, and that low power charging, anywhere from even 10 to 20 to 30 kilowatts, is more than sufficient to run all transport refrigeration equipment, whether it be a small rooftop unit or a very large trailer unit, to both keep the refrigeration equipment running and top off those batteries, so that when that truck or trailer leaves for its delivery route, it has all the range on it that's planned for that route, and your cargo is cool and temperature controlled.
Is that going to mean two different sets of connectors and cables and sources of power? Or can you get it both out of one?
Hopefully not, although we do see the need to develop more advanced power transfer, possibly between the tractor and the trailer. But for right now, we're seeing in Europe, as probably what we'll see here in North America as well, that the trailer carries its own power, just like it carries its own tank of diesel fuel today. And the tractor carries its own power, obviously, just like it does today. At some point, there are options to connect those. There are opportunities to do that. But the complexity, the technology still has to be developed, as do the standards.
Okay, that sounds good so far. Matt Cernick is the lead engineer for electrical systems at Thermo King. We're going to take a short pause here for a quick word from Thermo King. And when we come back, Matt and I are going to talk about power sharing, sometimes called e-PTO. Matt and I will be right back after this.
Wondering how your business will meet new regulations and increasing market expectations for more sustainable operations? There's good news. In a world where sustainability has become business table stakes, Thermo King is going all in. They're investing more than $100 million to deliver a fully electric product in every segment of the cold chain by 2025. The effort includes launching Evolve, a new brand representing their all-electric product line for the truck, trailer, bus, rail, and marine markets. That means you can rest easier knowing that Thermo King is working day and night to deliver bold solutions for a more sustainable world that helps customers decrease their carbon footprints while still driving profit. Customer success has always been one of Thermo King's core purposes. The growing demand for electrification doesn't change that fact. That's why you can count on Thermo King to help meet your sustainability goals as you transition your fleets to stay ahead of the curve.
We're back with Matt Cernick, Thermo King's lead engineer for electrical systems. Matt, when I hear the term e-PTO, I think of some device located some distance from the power source. I guess a TRU meets that description because it's mounted on the trailer, not the tractor where the batteries are sometimes stored. With fully electric trucks, will trailers require their own batteries and power converters, or can they be shared between the tractor and the trailer?
Thanks, Jim. I think as we talked about charging previously, trailers for now will come with their own power source. Trailers need to be autonomous. Trucks, on the other hand, straight trucks, when we apply transport refrigeration equipment with them as part of the body, I think that the power source there can be shared and combined. And the way we do that is we define an e-PTO or electric power takeoff, where we take the high voltage off of the main battery and use that to run accessory equipment.
So does that require a cable then between the tractor and the trailer? Or will it require a cable?
Yes. It requires a fairly specialized interface. It's not just the high voltage. It's not just the safety interlock systems, but also signals for control and command of both the accessory system and the vehicle controls to exchange information between the two systems.
Okay, so let's combine the two here. We've been talking about standards. We've been talking about e-PTO. I understand you're leading a task force on e-PTO at SAE. Can you tell us a bit about that? What you hope to accomplish?
Yeah, I think the work we're doing with SAE to help define e-PTO is really coming along nicely. We've been at it for about a year and a half now, and I have a small but very active group combined of vehicle OEMs and bodybuilders and other industry experts to help define what this power transfer looks like, what the signals should be, what the safety systems should be in transferring power between a vehicle and bodybuilder equipment. So the standard, the number is J3253, and it's electric power takeoff for commercial vehicles. And we're defining this under the SAE Truck and Bus Electrical Committee, and we'll be hopefully getting something out there for the public to look at the end of this year. So lots of good information being pulled together from these industry experts. We're looking to define power levels, connector topologies, signals, and safety systems to make sure that these connectors are durable, serviceable, and will last the life of the vehicle.
How many people are at the table here? You've got truck manufacturers, OEMs, you've got the suppliers of some of the charging technologies, you've got yourself and your competitors, you've got trailer manufacturers. Everybody's got a finger in this pie here. How is it all coming together? Can you bring all these parties to the table and get them all to agree on everything?
Well, I've contacted many people, and those interested have definitely become part of this task force. I think part of the task force work is to maybe evangelize our work a little bit more, get it out in the public. There's likely going to be an opportunity here this spring at the ACT show in Long Beach. There'll be basically a discussion, a board discussion there on e-PTO. I hope to share a little bit more of the details about what the task force is working on there, and generally get feedback from the industry, because once we get the information out there, I'm sure we'll get a lot more feedback. And again, standardization is making sure that this equipment is interoperable, that the standards are actually implementable, and that they can be done at a reasonable cost and a reasonable technology investment level.
And just off the top of your head, maybe look into your crystal ball here for our last questions. How long do you think this is going to take to come together?
Standards implementations usually take a long time. Usually the definition of in this case, a standard connector will come, at some point here, probably within the next year. It'll take a while for prototypes to be made and evaluated, additional feedback to be received, and probably a couple of revisions of the standard in the meantime. OEM adoption can take years. We've seen that as part of my work on TMC. We've implemented telematics connectors as standards, and it's taken several years for those to propagate into all the OEMs. So it's not something that happens overnight. But with standards, everybody understands that there's a goal.
And it's usually worth the wait.
Yep.
We've been speaking with Matt Cernick. He's Thermo King's lead engineer for electrical systems. If you'd like to learn more about this push for standardization in transportation refrigeration, I invite you to listen to the full interview on the audio version of this HDT Leadership Insights podcast. Matt and I are going to dig deeper into some of the technical requirements and any hurdles that might lay ahead. Remember to follow and connect with us on social media and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any future episodes of HDT Talks Trucking or the HDT Leadership Insights podcast. I'm Jim Park. Thanks for watching.
Thermo King wants every child in the world to have an ice cream cone. That only happens if their products help customers deliver refrigerated goods. Whether you transport frozen tuna, fresh produce, pharmaceuticals, or anything else that needs refrigeration, count on Thermo King to keep your business ahead of the curve with advances in electrification, telematics, and more. Discover Thermo King's latest innovations at thermoking.com.